Hi, I'm Skye.
And I'm Dom, and together we're part of the Escape the City community. Back in 2010, escaping your corporate career was a pretty fringe idea, but today, thanks to the advances in technologies and shifts in attitude, it's becoming increasingly mainstream. Escape is a movement of people who believe that life is too short to do work that doesn't matter to you, and that doing something different is possible.
We're on a mission to help 1 million people to quit their corporate jobs and find work that matters to them and the world. And we wanted to share the incredible stories of those who have already made their career escapes with you.
Welcome to The Escape Artists.
I have been to some escape events. Escape events help me transition.
Today's escape artist is Meera Moynihan, corporate escapee and director of operations at education startup Now Teach. Meera started her career in the world of corporate consulting, and her journey has taken her from corporate to government, running as a member of parliament, and now as the director of operations at education startup Now Teach, where she's helping others to pursue a more meaningful career through teaching.
Meera, great to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for agreeing to join us.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited to have you on because you have had, I would say, a really unique journey.
I left EY about 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago exactly, to try and find a bit of purpose in my career. Right now, I am Director of Operations for Now Teach, which actually helps experienced career changes into teaching. So my own transition has found me helping others to transition, much in the same way that you have, Dom, in terms of helping other people make that leap. So as Director of Ops, I look after all the kind of back office functions of the way Now Teach operates as an organisation. So it's a really nice role. It kind of brings together a lot of my experience in working in big organisations, working across kind of lots of different departments, finance, HR, IT, thinking about how we make things run a bit more smoothly. So I'm really enjoying it, and it feels like a great fit.
How big is Now Teach?
So we are about 20 people and about 1.5 million turnover. At the moment, we are recruiting between 150 and 200 career changers into teaching every year. We have just got some funding, really excitingly, to grow that to 200 to 250 a year and work across the whole of England.
And we're going to find out how you got there. But before we do that, Skye.
I'm probably the most excited to speak to you because your journey is something that resonates a lot with me in terms of what you went into and in the politics space, because I come from a similar background. I studied politics, I studied policy, I used to work in a think tank, and I feel like we're operating in similar paradigms in some ways. So I don't want to talk too much about myself on the podcast about you.
Yeah. I always think ops roles are very interesting because there's a lot of like behind the scenes work to make an organisation go, and it's not always the glamorous stuff and it's not always the front of house stuff, but it is what can really help that organisation to thrive.
Yes.
You know, COOs don't often get the MBEs and all the accolades the interviews and all of that stuff. But they are often the cog of like really making the organisation work.
So Meera, let's start at the beginning, like, in terms of your career. When was the first time you had an idea of what you thought you might want to do as a career when you were younger?
So I guess I always thought that I might go into law or potentially journalism. We used to play lots of games of the game of life, and you only really got a good salary if you had like a good profession behind you. And I think my Indian parents were very keen to instill that in me. And then I went and did arts for my degree and did history and kind of rebelled against the idea of going into sciences and becoming a doctor. So I guess whilst I was at university, I kind of got quite excited or interested in social disadvantage. So I went to Cambridge. I went from a state school. Both my parents had gone to university, but they were the first generation to go. And, you know, from my high school, a couple of people went to Oxbridge every year. But when I got to Cambridge, you know, I would meet people where, you know, half their year group would be there. And you know, people who were generations, their brothers went there, their sisters went there, their mums did, their dads, you know, just whole swathes of people where it was just very expected that they would go and be able to go to the elite universities and get these amazing opportunities. And I thought myself I'd been pretty lucky, but I got to uni and all of a sudden felt, at the bottom end of the scale, even though in the grand scheme of things, I'm probably, pretty middle class. So even in that sort of highlighted to me just the social disadvantage that was in the country, and it frustrated me that as an Asian state school woman from Wales, it was very unusual for me to even get to Cambridge, let alone make a success of my life afterwards, and that actually going to Cambridge gave me a load of opportunities that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't gone there. So I basically started working on Access, which is trying to encourage underrepresented groups to get into Oxbridge, Cambridge specifically. I guess that started to kind of instill in me that there were like some social injustices that really annoyed me, and I wanted to do something about it. So I took a couple of internships, one in a political think tank and then one in the civil service, because I thought that was going to be the most direct route to be able to have an impact. And ironically enough, having those internship experiences made me feel a bit like, wow, there's a lot of talk that goes on in politics and in the civil service, or at least the civil servants have to do what the politicians want them to. So why don't I go and get some good grounding experience in a corporate, work with lots of organisations, learn how to do something useful, and then later down the line apply that experience to a more purposeful organisation. So I guess I always had it a little bit in the back of my mind. And by that point, I decided that I didn't really want to do law. Again, it felt a bit like I would spend a lot of time writing documents and, editing words and not really making change. So I started in EY, and actually being ambitious, I remember one of the first presentations, I don't know if you remember these ones, Dom, when they put up a slide at the beginning that says like, this is you. As a graduate, you could be promoted in 2 years to be a senior consultant. You could be promoted after that, senior manager, senior manager, director, partner. You could be a partner in 8 years. And I went, yeah, that's what I'm going to do, because I am, straight A student, got to Cambridge. I've got to be at the top of that. And so, worked very hard in EY. Did well, got through my promotion cycles as I should. And then I guess I sort of got to about four years in and went, not sure whether this is the best use of my time. How much difference am I making? If I look up the ladder, do I want to do the next 4 or 5 years to get to partner? Partner looks all right. That looks quite fun. You get to meet lots of clients, help them find problems, bring in a whole load of team to work really hard to fix them. Like all of that sounds great fun, but there's a lot in between that feels like it not really as enjoyable or feeling quite as impactful. So it was kind of around that point that I started to think, okay, is this the time to switch? Or again, is it too early? It's much easier to switch from the private sector to the public sector. It's much harder to go the other way. And so there was always in the back of my mind, like, when's the right time to go? I know I want to do it. When's going to be the right time? When do I have enough experience that I can add value to the public sector, to the social sector, to charities, to social enterprises, to people making social change, but not shoot myself in the foot because I haven't got quite enough under my belt to be able to do that. So it was always kind of playing on my mind a bit. And Dom and Rob had set up Escape the City. They'd done their own transition. They were, helping loads of people into really purposeful organisations. So I went along to an event run by On Purpose. It really resonated with me. The idea of doing something that would dip my toe in the water, help me learn a little bit more about the network, have a kind of structured development program alongside it, and enable me to learn a bit more before I figured out where the longer term path was.
Was there a moment at EY where you just thought, you know what, this isn't for me?
Yeah. So I was doing a project with an energy company, and we were working, 70-hour weeks, commuting an hour and a half, 2 hours each way on top of that. And we sat in a meeting and we were talking about whatever the project was supposed to be delivering. And somebody went, oh, so is this, new project Kaleidoscope then? And they basically just referenced a project that they'd done 2 years previously, 18 months previously, with another company doing more or less the same thing as we were doing ourselves. And to me, I went, oh, okay. So basically, this organisation goes through the same thing every 2 years. A new director of marketing, director of comms, director of recruitment comes in and goes, all right, I need to change up what our strategy is and I need to rethink the way we deliver and what we're doing. So I'll get in a bunch of consultants and we'll reshape everything and then I'll get a promotion in 3 years' time and whatever. And so it just kind of made me feel, I'm working really hard. I'm really committed to this organisation, both EY and the company I was working for. I think we can make real change in making this organisation work better. But everyone I was working with had just been through it, several times. And they knew that after I'd left, it would be someone else that would bring in a new project. And to me, it just felt like, is this really worth it? Is this worth me working my socks off for someone else to just come in and do it again? I don't want to be in that position. If I'm doing something, I want to know that it is moving something forward. It is making a change. So that made me kind of really push and think, well, actually, maybe it is time to go. Maybe it is time to see if I can bring those skills somewhere else and where it will add value and it will change things and it will have an impact.
So it was like the long-term impact of the projects that you were working on were brought into question.
Yeah, I think it just made me think it's just not really changing. Nothing really moves on.
No, exactly.
And around the same time, actually, I'd worked for this client once before and I bumped into someone from the client team in the canteen and had a lovely chat with them. The lovely thing about EY and all the clients, not all the clients, most of the clients I worked on, the people are the best thing about anywhere you work. It's always about even if you're working for an arms firm or you're selling tobacco, I imagine most people are nice people and they're nice people to work with. And so I really enjoyed working with this client. And we sat down, had a coffee, and I asked about how things were going and, had any of it stuck. And it was just really depressing how little had actually. There were some things that had changed, which was great, and it was really nice to hear. But there was quite a lot that hadn't, and it just made you feel a bit like, okay, well, maybe things would change more if I was in a different sector or I was doing something else.
You left EY like manager, I guess.
Yeah.
And going down to one of the things that everyone talks about with doing the On Purpose program, which is an amazing program, but when I speak to people about it, they say, oh yeah, the money.
So on the money front, there was some interesting conversations with friends. I spoke more to friends about it than family, because I think my family would have just been aghast at the idea of me taking such a pay cut. But essentially I took about a 70% pay cut to do On Purpose. Yeah. Which is pretty bracing. In fact, I worked for 2 weeks in January before I started the On Purpose program, and I think I earned more money in those 2 weeks than I did for like the subsequent 2 months or something ridiculous. But
for those who don't know, On Purpose is a year-long program where they place you into. Did you have 2 placements?
Yes.
Yeah, 2. So they'd place you into 2 different social impact organizations where you get to work on interesting projects, and then you have 1 day a week of training as well. It's kind of a leadership development, half a day a week of training. All right, I'm not selling it very well, but hopefully and then you get paid a stipend for the year, and it's like a as you say, it's 20, I think maybe it's 24 grand for the year, something like that.
I remember having a conversation with one of the partners at EY who was again just a bit flabbergasted that I would be happy to live on whatever it was at the time, 20k in London. And I guess I had a few different conversations about it. One of them was with a friend who said, well, if you're going to get paid that little, why don't you just take 6 months out, go and spend that time doing some training, getting some unpaid experience and then going and finding a real job or a more permanent job. And I guess that realization made me think, well, if I stop looking at it as a salary and looking at it as an investment in me, if I was doing an MBA program or a master's or something like that, or I decided to take some time out to volunteer, I wouldn't be getting paid at all. In fact, if I was doing some kind of training, I would probably be paying for it. So if I look at this in a different way and I see it as a year for me to invest and learn and think about what my next steps are, then it just sort of changed my frame of mind as to what the value of that was, and therefore what that experience was worth, and seeing it less as a pay cut and a drop in salary, and more as this is going to give me a different perspective and I need to approach this in a different way. But I did also want to see it a bit as a hiatus, because living in London sustainably is quite tricky on that salary. And so I wanted to know, one of the questions I asked the various On Purpose people before I made the switch, I did really consider it. So I got the offer, and then I really took a lot of time to think about, is this the right thing to do? Could I just go and take 6 months out and travel or volunteer somewhere or do something different? Could I go straight into this industry and find a job myself without needing to do On Purpose in between? So I did take quite a lot of time thinking about it, and I did ask, what are salary expectations after you've done On Purpose? Like, what do people go on to do? Because I don't mind taking a salary cut for a little bit, but I'm not expecting to earn my EY salary again. But there's somewhere in the middle that feels like, a comfortable amount to live on. Yeah, it feels like the right value for my time. And so, I checked those things before I signed up. And then I guess I had in my head an idea after I'd finished On Purpose for the kind of roles and the kind of salary that I would want. And then a couple that I went into interviews and went, well, I earned this in EY. And they were like, they just laughed in my face of like, of course we can't pay you that. Like, of course we can't. Like, you're coming in at this level, not even our chief exec gets paid that, whatever. And it's taken several years. It's only, in the last couple of years that I've got near to what I was getting paid 10 years ago. Yeah. But I'm fine with that. Like, I'm happy with what I earn. In fact, I set the budgets in Now Teach, so I know exactly what I earn and what the organisation can afford. And I guess in my view, for me, it's just about like, can I live comfortably? Do I feel I'm being paid fairly for what I do? And I know I could earn more in this sector in different organisations, and I could certainly earn substantially more if I went and worked somewhere else. But do I enjoy the work I do, and do I put a value on that? And I do. I put a value on enjoying going into work. I put a value on not having Sunday dread. I put a value on not minding if I need to work on weekends and evenings. And I put a value on feeling really proud about the organisation I work for. So yes, you're not going to earn as much, very unlikely to earn as much as you did in the private sector. There's other ways of judging your self-worth. And I guess I've got friends who work in the corporate sector and in banking and earn, inordinate amounts of money, way more than I could understand how. I couldn't understand how you would spend that much money, but, that's just not the way I grew up with money. Like, we didn't have loads of it. So I always kind of had quite a strong sense of what I think things are worth and what I think is value. And they really struggle with the idea of moving to a different sector because they're like, well, that's what I'm worth. I am worth 6 figures. I am worth 200 grand. Like, that's what my time is worth. And you're like, well, are you? Like, are you worth more than a doctor? Are you worth more than this person or that person? Or is it just the industry you work in pays you that much? Like, it's just relative to what you do and what the rest of that industry pays, not necessarily like the value you bring to the world. And everyone has value in different ways, and salaries are pitched accordingly. But I like I'm happy with where I am on the salary front now, and I see my value in a different way than I might have if I worked in a different industry.
we work with a lot of people who are 10 years into their careers or 15 years or however long. And as you say, that when you're working in a corporate, you're climbing the ladder, you're getting up, you're going up the ladder. And the higher you go, the harder it is to come down.
Yes.
And it feels like people get quite addicted to the lifestyle and they find it very difficult to do that. And the kind of reframing that you did of, okay, I'm going to take a salary cut, but really I'm paying myself to do this training. What were your placements? Who did you work with and kind of what did you learn from that?
So I had one of my placements was with the social investment consultancy, which basically did consultancy, but for charities and social enterprises, or worked with corporates to think about their social impact and social innovation programs. And it was completely eye-opening as to the kind of organizations that you could work with. It was actually incredibly glamorous in lots of ways because the founder has some great connections and, you know, you get to work on lots of different really interesting projects. And, you know, he was doing some work with some of the royals about setting up a foundation and quite an interesting experience and quite different to anything I'd done at EY from that side. But the work itself was actually quite similar. It was, you know, it was consultancy projects, and that actually made me really value my time at EY. It made me really value my time at EY because it showed me that those 4 or 5 years had actually instilled in me quite a lot of useful skills that might not felt like they were adding a lot of value in certain corporates that had that experience already or had lots of people that they could draw on. But for charities and other organisations that hadn't had that level of training or development or support time or ability to invest, or even just kind of access to systems and structures, I could add a huge amount just by offering that. You know, imposter syndrome always plays a part in lots of people's lives, but I'd always felt a bit like, well, you know, what I do, anyone could do. You know, it's just a brain for hire. Nothing I do is any more transformative than any other person. But actually, it was like I did have a way of thinking about things that helped those organizations, not just the clients we worked with, but the social investment consultancy itself. You know, I ran some Excel training, for example, and there were just like little things like that where actually, you know, it helped give me confidence in what I'd done was valuable and that I did have a unique set of skills that could provide impact in other places. And then my second placement was with the London Early Years Foundation, which is a social enterprise that runs nurseries across London. And they really focus on kind of having a cross-subsidy model to ensure that, you know, they can really help people with affordable childcare as well as people who can afford childcare, and think about things like the home learning environment so that babies, children, toddlers have the best start in life. And again, you know, a very different kind of organisation, but one where I was able to bring quite a lot of skills and experience. I worked really closely with the director of HR. I ran a number of change programmes there. And I also delivered quite a lot of training, actually, which was all really interesting and really valuable. Although it was a slightly strange experience because actually EY was part of something called the Social Business Trust, where they support organisations with pro bono support, with financial support. And one of the things that was raised to me as I left EY was, well, why don't you just go and take a secondment with them instead of leaving? And whilst I was at London Early Years Foundation, having left, having given up the salary, having given up the pension, having given up the security, one of my EY colleagues came to the London Early Years Foundation on secondment. And I was obviously very happy to see her, and but slightly bitter at the fact that she was getting that same experience, having not given up any of the things that I had given up, and was still on her EY salary and still had a pension and still had job security, and she had a job to go back to, and she had access to the EY network and all the training and all of that. And I went, oh, maybe they were right. Maybe I should have just done it a different way. But she was incredibly envious of the network I had on Purpose and the training I was having and the fact that I'd left and therefore had a different mindset. And the grass is always greener. It's always, I guess what that taught me, or what that showed me, was that there are many different routes and you never know which path your life might take, but you should always try to appreciate the aspects of it that have been beneficial for you. So for me, like, actually the biggest thing I got out of On Purpose wasn't the work experience, because quite frankly, I could have done any of those jobs straight from EY. That wasn't really the thing that changed for me, but it was this network. From that network, I got my subsequent jobs from jobs that were shared around that network. I have got access to people across London, people in Paris, people in Berlin now, as On Purpose has spread, who are, even though I don't know them, we have a shared bond of On Purpose that I can put an email out and go, oh, does anybody know what a good training might look like if I wanted to do a session on greening your finances for my team? Or does anybody know what a good payroll provider might be? Or does anyone know where I could buy a Christmas present made from recycled plastic? So it's just that, you take that stuff with you, those networks you take with you. And that's one of the things I found really beneficial.
I love On Purpose. They're great. There are a lot of good people in there. That's for sure.
So after On Purpose, I did do the 6 months traveling thing. So I finished On Purpose and decided to make the most of not having any ties or any job, and took 6 months to go traveling around Southeast Asia and Australia and New Zealand, which was brilliant. And obviously leaving On Purpose, where there's a big focus on your development and self-reflection, I was like, 6 months on the beach, I'll really figure out what it is I'm going to do. I'll come back with this great idea of what I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And obviously that didn't happen. It was just it was a great experience. It was great on many, many levels. And I did do some reflection on what kind of things I was looking for, but I guess the totality of experience from On Purpose and from having that time out was to try to reshift my expectation of what a career looks like. So in EY, day one of EY, they show you that pipeline of this many years at this level, then this promotion, then this promotion, then this promotion, and then you'll be partner. So my idea of career progression was, right, well, I have to get to the next stage. I have to do whatever it is that takes me to the next level. And I guess On Purpose started to open my eyes up to, actually, most people's careers aren't like that. They're not linear. You kind of go from one world to another, and you may have some progression in between, but you may have quite a few lateral moves, and that's fine. It's much more about finding the right role for you at that time of your life. So that's the thing I learned from traveling, amongst other things. And then when I came back, I took an interim role with Future First, who I love, who basically epitomized my experience of going to Cambridge. So Future First find alumni from state schools and bring them back into their schools, and they go, hi, this is Meera, and she went to your school and now she is Director of Operations at Now Teach, whatever it is. So I went and worked with Future First for a bit, which was great and wonderful, and I love them. And then moved to Nesta, who are an innovation foundation working with lots of charities, social enterprises, social entrepreneurs to really boost their impact. So I worked there for a couple of years, helping to run some of their social change programs, a job that I found through the On Purpose network. Hadn't even heard of Nesta before On Purpose. And again, I've got some great networks from there, had some great experiences working with amazing organizations. And the great thing about being in somewhere like Nesta is that you've got the money and you can, make those decisions that help those organizations to grow, which is a wonderfully privileged position to be in. But I guess I always thought one of the things that I, wanted to get back into is education, rolling all the way back to those days when I was sitting in Cambridge going, no one here looks like me. No one here sounds like me. How can we make the world look more like it actually should look like, and less like the 5% of people in this country that've got the most wealth? That's why I kind of wanted to find a move more into education, and that's where I took the role with ARC. ARC is an education charity and a multi-academy trust, and they work in some of the most deprived areas of the UK, really trying to push education outcomes for young people. And they also support a number of education ventures who are doing great things to help young people and education. That was brilliant and felt like a great fit. And I stayed at ARC for nearly 5 years. A great chance to work mostly in operations on projects and bringing together my experiences of strategy and program delivery and all the things that I've been learning over the previous 10 years. And it was through ARC again that I found Now Teach, and again felt like a great fit. Like Now Teach helps people who've got experienced careers in other areas, who've worked in different sectors for 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Maybe not 50, but for many decades, and bring that experience into the classroom. And to me, it was brilliant to be able to draw on my own experiences of having worked in a corporate and come into the education sector to think about, well, how do we help lots of other people bring that experience right the way into the classroom and really help with those things around role models and aspirations and opportunity that so many people don't get.
Yeah.
So it really felt like a good fit, just from my own personal experiences and motivations.
So when you were at ARC, that is when you were campaigning to become an MP. So how did that come about?
So, I mean, if you can't tell by now, I'm really passionate about political issues and addressing, various social injustices. And I guess it just got to that point in my life. What year was this? So I basically started getting involved in politics around 2017, as with a lot of people, kind of post-Brexit vote. I went, oh God, like things don't just happen the way I want them to just because I think it. You have to go out and make change happen. And so I thought, well, do you know what I've always been interested in politics. I've always had certain parties that I am interested in because of their specific positions on things. I'm always passionate about elect the Lords and electoral reform. I want to address social disadvantage, lots of different areas that I'm really interested in. Basically, I started getting involved with politics at that stage and going out campaigning with my local political party.
And when you say you started getting involved in politics, because I always hear people who kind of become MPs or get into politics and they say that. What does that mean? Does that mean literally joining a party and then handing out leaflets? Or
Yeah. So getting involved in a political party, I think people say it because it sounds so much more glamorous than what it actually is. So getting involved in a political party is basically delivering leaflets, talking to people on the doorstep, trying to raise money, trying to get other people involved in activism. So, campaigning for things, getting names on petitions, writing articles to your local newspaper about things that, that need to be highlighted.
I see.
So it's quite a lot of, basically a lot of that.
And you're doing this in your spare time?
Yeah, and that's the hard bit. So when I first started getting involved, I was working full time. I was chair of trustees of an education charity, and I was a school governor. And I was also trying to move house at the same time, and I was pregnant. And so it was just a lot of juggling and trying to find some spare time to do stuff. But there was a lot of momentum back then in the mid 2010s of people being really incensed about a lot of things and trying to kind of get involved. And there's been lots of ebbs and flows in politics since. But I guess from there I went, do you know what? I think I'd be a good candidate, and I think I'd be able to have more of an impact as a candidate than I would just as an activist. There's lots of things I want to change. There's people I want to talk to. I really enjoy being on the doorstep, talking to people about things that they're frustrated with or having issues with, and then being able to try and I'm a problem solver. So I want to know what it is that's making people's lives harder, and how can I go and help them and make a difference. So I thought, well, the best way for me to do that and to show other people that it's not just white men that do it would be to be the role model and be the candidate. So I kind of went through the selection process to become a candidate, and politics being what it is at the moment, there was a snap general election. So I was a candidate. It was my first time standing, so I stood in what was quite a safe seat, as in the incumbent is going to win this seat like by miles. But this is a great opportunity for me to learn and understand what it is to stand as a candidate and learn about the experience, and also be able to then divert my time to supporting target seats. And at the time, which was December 2019, I was working full time. I was chair of a charity. I had a toddler at home, and I was 3 months pregnant. So the idea of standing in anything more than a paper, what they call them paper candidates, because essentially your name's on the piece of paper and you're not going to get elected, but there's still like plenty you can do in the area to kind of build up awareness, to support other seats around the country, etc.
And knowing you, Meera, you weren't just a paper candidate.
No, I wasn't just a paper candidate.
Full throttle.
Yeah, we knocked on hundreds of doors, as well as doing that locally and roping my dad in to deliver leaflets as well. And all my siblings-in-law coming over and just like handing out things. My husband, dropping leaflets off to people, me putting stamps on everything. So as well as doing all of that, I was also campaigning in a local target seat every weekend. And so I was doing all of that kind of during the week. And then on the weekends, we'd go and stand.
Oh my gosh.
And it was pretty hard work.
And how did it go? Were you pleased with the outcome?
An amazing experience. We doubled our vote, which was brilliant. Like that was our aim, was to double the vote locally. Amazing. We massively raised our profile. We brought in new volunteers. We brought in new funders, and I learned a huge amount. Really enjoyed the experience. I also, so my brother-in-law's friend was a documentary maker, so he made like a 10-minute documentary about it as well, which was really fun.
Amazing.
So it was and I also built my network. I learned a lot more. I met a lot more people in the party, all of whom just are amazing people that do fantastic things and are really passionate about making a difference for. And the best thing about being a candidate was going to student hustings, because if you engage at all on social media, which I do for my sins and probably shouldn't, it's really depressing. Like you just read a barrage of people being really frustrated about all the things that are going wrong, and then you can just get into this spiral of despair about it. And then you go to student hustings and you talk to the next generation, and they're so articulate and insightful, and they see through all the BS, and they ask really good questions, and they care a lot about the things that they should care about, and they're not as partisan as I think the older generations. Like so many people, when you're doing political campaigning, so many people you meet are just like, well, we vote Labour, we vote Conservative because we always do here, and they're the only ones that are going to win, and my parents voted for them, so I'm just going to do that. Or, I'm going to vote for them because they're the party of business, or they're the party of the working classes, without really engaging with whether that's true or not, whether that might have been true. Is it still true? Do they actually vote in the way that you think they will? Do they actually care about things in the same way that you do? But it definitely felt like in those student hustings, people cared about issues, and they were quite well informed about those issues and where different people stood on those issues. And that made me incredibly hopeful. And you can see it with with COP26 and with climate change activists and the things that they campaign for. As long as we haven't completely messed everything up by the time that they come around, which hopefully we won't, then I think there's a lot to be hopeful for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they care about purposeful jobs as well, it feels like.
So one of the things that you said, the reasons why you wanted to stand as a candidate was obviously thinking you'd be a good candidate, which let me know the next time you stand, it will definitely be voting for you. But you wanted to show people that you didn't have to be a white man to stand as a candidate. What was that experience like? Was that difficult? Were people supportive? It's obviously a male-dominated space.
I think the barriers often do come down to when you want to raise a family, if I'm honest, because it is just very difficult when you are pregnant and a candidate, or when you're trying to juggle a family and childcare. You know, women face more abuse, more harassment. You know, they get a lot of judgment if they make those kind of choices. That makes it very difficult. And I think there's a heightened awareness at the moment around safety, given you know, the recent shocking murder of David Amos and Joe Cox a couple of years ago. You know, there's and that can be quite intimidating if you're a younger woman potentially, and how you might maintain that resilience in the face of that. I also think there's a bit of an attitude about what an MP looks like, not just from an aesthetic perspective as in what gender they are or what ethnicity they are, but that you need a sort of alpha male polished professional person to be your MP, when people are not, you know, the population as a whole isn't all like that, and they've got different experiences. And actually what we need more in politics and in leadership of all positions is to have the softer side, the more empathetic people, as well as the kind of really hard-nosed, the ones that can have a debate in the chamber. And one of the things that concerns me about the way the dialogue in the current government, that we don't want to get too political, but the debate in the current government is that there's quite a lot of bluster and political sparring. It's as if the debates are all hypothetical and not real and not about people's lives. I went to a Future Women MPs event where we had a female MP join us, and while she was talking about the privilege of being an MP, she got quite choked up. And it was so touching to see that someone cared that much about their constituents, about their ability to make change, that they saw it as a privilege and not a right. And I guess as much as I would like to see more women in politics, I would like to see more of those qualities in politics, because I think we'd get policy that more reflects what people's life experiences are and that takes into account more of that balance of what people need.
If you were to give some advice to, say, Skye about how to get into politics, or not just Skye, but because I feel like a lot of people who leave the corporate world leave with an idealistic view of, I want to have more impact.
It's why so many come and join Now Teach, because it's a great way to kind of like pull that experience and see a direct impact.
Yeah, exactly. And having impact, either having impact in the work you're doing, but also having impact in the kind of world you live in. Going into politics, I feel like, is quite high on the agenda of the Escape community. If you were to give people advice as to if they want to start doing that, what would it be?
I guess because I'm thinking about it from a different perspective, which is you have to, I guess the thing about going into politics, I'm using inverted commas, is that it can be quite a long road before you get to that point of being able to be an MP. I think it is easier if you are in one of the two main parties, and there are quite a lot of seats where actually it doesn't matter who you are and you're very likely to win. So there's that aspect of, you know, what's your likely route to get to being an MP? And I guess my experience of going into politics is that there's lots of things you can do, even if you're not that person, even if you're not the MP themselves. There's so much you can do to help the community just by being an advocate for them, listening to them, finding out what it is that the challenges people are facing on the ground, and helping that to inform what action you can take. So I think actually being an MP, good MPs really can do that connection with their local community, and they can advocate for change on their behalf. They can oscillate between the kind of the community issues and the national ones, because they're massively interrelated. I mean, the first thing you can do is find a community of people that care about the issue that you care about. And sometimes it isn't necessarily joining a political party. It might just be campaigning on a specific issue. And once you kind of start to do that and influence change on that side, then that can give you a platform to then go, well, actually, there's multiple issues that I care about, and therefore I can then bring that together by standing as a councillor, or standing as a parish councillor, or standing as a London Assembly member, or standing as an MP. And I think the key thing is to not give up if it feels like being an MP is too far away. There are things you can do in between.
When you reflect on your life now, 10 years on post-escape, on your first escape from Ernst & Young, how do you reflect on the differences in either like your life or how you feel? Or
my reflections on where I am now are, I guess, from a practical perspective, I don't get Sunday night dread anymore. Like, I don't, I'm actually fine to going to work on a Monday morning. I really enjoy my job. I really enjoy working with the people I work with. I really enjoy the impact that we have. And I don't mind doing all those extra, like, I'm actually quite happy working later into the evenings, because I just want to do a good job. I want to kind of give it my best. One of the reflections I had around transitioning was to be brave about it. I guess one of the reasons I went to on purpose instead of trying to find a role directly was because I was a little bit nervous about what I could do and what value I could bring, and would I be able to find a role that worked. And on purpose taught me that I could. So there's kind of part of me that goes, wow, do you know what? You can just be brave, and no decision is ever, it's never a one-way path. If you take a leap and it doesn't work out, you can always find your way back to where you were, or take a different route. Like, it's always, no decision is ever permanent. And I think that's a really important thing to remember when you're thinking about your escape, thinking about your purpose, thinking about any job decision you make, any like role, or you can do it, and if it doesn't work out, it's fine. You'll have learned something, you'll be able to move on. It'll help you the next time you need to make that decision. And I guess that's the advice I would give myself 10 years previous.
Oh, well, Meera, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and hearing about your journey in the last 10 years. 10 years.
Amazing.
And thanks so much for sharing it.
No problem. Thanks for getting in touch.
Thank you so much. It's really inspiring. I'm inspired. I know, Skye, you inspired?
I'm super inspired. I'm like going to go out campaigning tomorrow. I'm ready. I feel ready.
Yeah.
It's really inspiring because as a woman who studied politics, always wanted to go into politics, worked in, think tank, thought about it, have thought about trying to get more involved. You do feel like you're a bit on your own. People say, oh, you shouldn't do that. They get loads of abuse online, or, I've got my dad literally texted me yesterday saying, I hope you don't try to go into public politics. And, it's hard to put yourself out there and kind of step out. And, it's just super inspiring to hear about doing that and doing something different. Really inspiring.
And finally, Skye, any opportunities for you that stand out in the top 10 this week?
Well, this week we have an incredible opportunity to become a B Corp sustainability consultant with an organization called Seismic. And Seismic are working to help companies to work towards net zero and to improve their sustainability. And they have 2 goals over the next 5 years, which is firstly to be the best employer you've ever had, and secondly to enable 10 million people to work for B corporations and net zero committed companies. So a really interesting organization, a great opportunity. They're offering flexible working hours and flexible working locations, so definitely worth checking out. And remember, you can check out this opportunity and lots of other really interesting ones on the website, which is www.escapethecity.org. Hope you find something you really enjoy. So thanks so much.
Thanks for listening, and see you next week.
Next week on the podcast.
I wasn't adventurous at all as a kid. I was completely normal. And the first inkling I ever had of the whole world of adventure came when I was meant to be revising for my physics A-levels. I can remember it very clearly, but instead I got out of the library a book by Ranulph Fiennes called Living Dangerously, just with his crazy life story of mad expeditions around the world. And that was the very first inkling I had that there were any other possible worlds out there.
From teaching to navigating the world on perilous and wild adventures, National Geographic's Adventure of the Year, Al Humphreys, is going to be sharing some of his story and his incredible learnings with us.